Ellen Moore stood at the top of the Government Center Station stairs, her breath trembling in the cold air. The morning rush moved around her like a river too strong to wade into. Her fingers clutched the rail as if the metal itself could keep her upright. She had not been this close to a subway entrance in more than 30 years, yet here she was, forced by life to return to the place she feared most. Her pulse struck the inside of her ribs, each beat a reminder of the past she never outran. The screech of a distant train drifted upward like a warning she could feel in her teeth. Voices echoed below, bouncing off tiled walls she remembered too well. Her throat tightened as the scent of dust and iron reached her. Everything in her wanted to turn around and disappear. But the new job started in less than an hour, and she had already failed once this week. The buses were unreliable, slow, and constantly overcrowded. Her supervisor had looked at her with a mix of annoyance and disbelief. "Everyone takes the subway," she had said sharply, as if Ellen were being dramatic. She never dared explain the truth behind her reluctance. The memory clawed at her now, sharp and uninvited. A rush of bodies, a misstep, a scream swallowed by the roar of an approaching train. The sensation of falling even though she never actually did. And the someone's hand pushing just enough to make her life flash once. That single moment reshaped every year that followed. She blinked hard, grounding herself in the present that felt too much like the past. The station lights flickered below, casting fractured shadows on the walls. People hurried down without hesitation, without fear, without memory. Ellen envied them and resented them all at once. To them, it was just a commute. To her, it was a battlefield. A woman brushed past her shoulder, offering a polite apology. The touch jolted through Ellen like static, snapping her stillness. Taking one step down felt like stepping into a mouth waiting to swallow her. The smell of damp concrete rose stronger with each breath. Her body whispered no, but her circumstances whispered louder. She made it down 3 steps before her vision blurred. The tile floor below warped like waves, threatening to pull her under. She turned back abruptly, stumbling into the open air again. Her lungs burned as if she had been underwater too long. And once more, the day began with her running away. The cold morning wind followed her as she hurried away from the station. Her footsteps beat a frantic rhythm on the sidewalk, matching her racing heart. It was always the same pattern: approach, panic, retreat. 31 years, and the cycle still held her captive. Fear had become a familiar, unwelcome companion. She was 19 the day her life split in two, before and after. The station had been crowded with impatient commuters. Someone shoved from behind playfully or carelessly. She never knew. She felt herself tilt toward the tracks as a train barreled in. The world shrank to a scream that never left her throat. A stranger had grabbed her coat and yanked her backward. She ended up on the ground, shaking, unable to speak. The crowd flowed around her, as though nothing had happened. No apology, no acknowledgement, no space for her terror. Everyone just kept moving, but she never did. From that day on, she built a life shaped by avoidance. She chose colleges, jobs, apartments far from subway lines. She mastered the art of pretending she preferred buses. She convinced herself it was simply a transportation choice. But deep down, she knew it was fear steering the wheel. Now, the cost of that fear pressed heavily against her chest. She needed this job, needed the stability it promised. But the city center demanded a commute she had never learned to face. Every map she checked led back to the same dark place. Every route forced her toward the station she hated. As she walked, her mind replayed the Niraxedin in looping flashes. The shove, the noise, the helpless tilt forward. Her memory had added details over time, maybe exaggerations, maybe truths, but the terror remained as real as the day it happened. She had never stepped on a subway train again. She paused at a crosswalk, clutching her bag tighter. A bus roared past, filled beyond capacity and running behind schedule. Her new life felt just as unstable as her old trauma. Something had to give, but she didn't know what. Only that she was running out of places to hide. Ellen arrived, breathless, at the office, 15 minutes late. Her hair clung to her forehead from the sprint up the block. She offered a rushed apology to the receptionist, but the woman's polite smile couldn't hide her disapproval. Everyone else had arrived on time, effortlessly. When Ellen entered the conference room, the meeting had begun. Chairs scraped quietly as she slid into an empty seat. Her supervisor glanced at her, eyebrows raised in judgment. The message was wordless but unmistakable, unacceptable. Heat rushed to Ellen's face, thick with embarrassment. The morning dragged on, heavy with tension. She tried to focus on training materials and instructions, but her mind kept drifting back to the station stairs. How close she had come to confronting them again, and how quickly her courage had crumbled. At lunch, she sat alone in the break room. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped her sandwich. The humiliation of arriving late settled like lead in her stomach. Her supervisor had reminded her of punctuality standards. The warning had been wrapped in corporate politeness. After work, she attempted another bus route home. It took nearly 2 hours, with long waits at every stop. Each minute reminded her how unsustainable this was. Her life was narrowing into a maze of delays and excuses. She felt trapped between trauma and survival. When she finally reached her apartment, exhaustion swallowed her. She dropped her bag by the door and leaned against the wall. Her reflection in the mirror looked older than 50. Here had etched lines time alone couldn't create. She wondered how much more she could endure. As night settled, she lay awake replaying the day. The embarrassment, the exhaustion, the fragile attempts. Her supervisor's disappointed stare lingered in her memory. A decision formed slowly, unwillingly, painfully. Tomorrow, she would try the subway again. The next morning, Ellen approached the station once more. The sky was gray, mirroring the heaviness in her chest. She paused at the top of the stairs, gripping the railing. Voices echoed below, rising like a tide she dreaded. Her nerves tightened with every passing second. A sudden burst of laughter from a group behind her startled her. The sound ricocheted through her body like an alarm. She took one shaky step down, then another. But a loud metallic bang from below froze her. Her breath stopped as panic surged uncontrollably. People moved around her, annoyed at the blockage. Someone brushed past too closely, jarring her balance. Her heart thrashed helplessly, as if begging to escape. Memories slammed into her with brutal clarity. She felt 19 again, helpless and small. Just as her knees threatened to buckle, a soft voice reached her. "Take your time, ma'am." She turned and saw a station musician tuning his guitar nearby. His calm expression offered an anchor she didn't expect. That simple kindness slowed her spiraling thoughts. She managed to step aside, leaning against the wall. Her hands trembled, but she breathed through it. The musician played a few gentle chords, unbothered. People flowed past them like a river partying around rocks. For the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Still, she couldn't bring herself to continue downward. The final stretch of stairs felt like a cliff edge. The smell of ozone from a passing train tightened her throat. Her body refused to go any further. Once again, fear won the battle. She backed away slowly, eyes burning with frustration. The musician offered her a small nod of understanding. She wanted to apologize to him, to herself, to everyone. But no words formed, only silent defeat. She turned and left before the shame crushed her completely. Work the next day felt heavier than usual. Her supervisor called her into a small conference room. The air smelled of coffee and stern expectations. A printed warning lay neatly on the table. Ellen's stomach dropped before a word was spoken. "You're talented, but punctuality is essential," her supervisor said. The tone was clipped, professional, unyielding. Ellen nodded, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. She wanted to explain the truth, but couldn't. Fear silenced her more effectively than rules ever could. She signed the warning with trembling fingers. It felt like signing a contract with her own failure. The supervisor dismissed her with a polite smile. But the message was unmistakable. One more mistake, and she was done. Ellen walked out feeling smaller than she had in years. During her break, she stood by the office window. Buses crawled through traffic below, slow and suffocating. She knew they would fail her again, just as before. Every route without the subway was a losing battle. Her options narrowed to one terrifying path. She whispered to herself, "I can't keep running." The truth tasted bitter and unfamiliar. For decades, she had avoided the past by avoiding trains. Now, the past was demanding repayment. The only way forward was downward into the station. That evening, she practiced breathing exercises she found online. Her apartment felt too quiet, too reflective of her inner turmoil. She paced the living room, rehearsing steps she feared taking. The shadows on the walls felt like memories reaching for her. Still, she promised herself she would try again tomorrow. As she lay in bed, sleep refused to claim her. Her mind replayed the warning, the disappointment, the fear. But beneath the fear, a faint ember of determination glowed. Something had shifted. though not enough to name. Tomorrow, she would face the station and herself again. The next morning, Ellen stood before the station entrance again. Her breath fogged in the crisp air as she steadied her resolve. She felt the familiar tremble in her knees but didn't step back. Instead, she inhaled deeply and placed one foot on the first step. Her body resisted, yet her will pressed gently forward. The stairwell hummed with the echoes of early commuters. Each footstep sounded sharper, as though the station were listening. She forced herself down the steps one at a time, painfully slow. The light dimmed slightly as she descended into the hallway. Her heartbeat pounded like a drum guiding her movement. When she reached the corridor, she froze, surprised. She hadn't expected to make it this far without collapsing. The tiled walls glowed faintly under buzzing fluorescent lights. She could smell the cold metal of the tracks far ahead, but for the first time, she didn't immediately flee. A familiar strum of guitar strings drifted toward her. The station musician sat against his usual pillar, tuning calmly. He glanced up, offering a small, encouraging smile. "You made it farther today," he said softly. Those simple words steadied her more than she expected. She leaned a hand against the cool tile, grounding herself slowly. The noise around her swelled and dipped like an uneven tide. Her breath came in shallow bursts, but she stayed. Each second felt like reclaiming territory once surrendered. Her fear trembled, but her presence stood stronger. After a few minutes, her pulse softened enough to think clearly. She examined the hall, noting details she once avoided. The flicker of lights, the flow of commuters, the distant rails. Nothing here wanted to harm her, she realized quietly. Only her memories did, gripping her like invisible hands. Eventually she turned to climb back out of the station. This time, her retreat wasn't frantic or drenched in panic. She emerged into daylight feeling shaky, yet strangely proud. One step had become several, and none had broken her. A fragile victory pulsed warmly in her chest. The next day she returned, heart pounding with familiar tension. But beneath the fear was a new thread of determination. She descended the stairs more quickly than before. Her breath trembled, but she didn't halt midway. The corridor greeted her like a memory she was rewriting. As she stood near the wall, another flashback surged upward. This time, the image was sharper, more intrusive than usual. She saw the blur of the man behind her during the shoving. His face remained indistinct, but the pressure felt real. Her body remembered terror before her mind caught up. Her knees buckled slightly, and she slid down the wall. Tears pricked her eyes as the memory overtook her senses. The roar of an incoming train echoed through the station. It merged seamlessly with the roar from decades ago. She pressed her palms to her ears, trying to separate them. A gentle voice broke through the rising panic. It was the musician again, crouching beside her calmly. "You're remembering, not reliving," he told her softly. The distinction settled slowly into her trembling chest. She clung to his words like a rope thrown in darkness. She let the tears fall without shame this time. The weight of 3 decades pressed against her ribs, yet the station no longer felt like an enemy closing in. It felt more like a room holding her old ghosts, and she was finally strong enough to face their presence. After several breaths, the panic loosened its grip. Her body relaxed, though exhaustion swept through her. She rose slowly, steadying herself with the wall. The musician simply nodded, never pushing further. His quiet presence made the station feel less cruel. Ellen walked back up the stairs with puffy eyes, but she didn't feel defeated the way she once did. She had confronted a deeper part of her fear today. The memory hurt, yet it no longer controlled her fully. Something inside her had shifted, small but undeniable. By the 4th day of trying, she reached the corridor again. The familiar hum no longer felt like a threat. Her steps were still careful, but far less hesitant. She kept her focus on the end of the hall. Today, she intended to reach the platform itself. The distant rush of wind signaled an approaching train. Her chest tightened as the air vibrated faintly, but she kept walking, counting each step deliberately. Commuters brushed past her with the indifference of routine. She envied their ease but used it as quiet motivation. The platform emerged, wide and bright under harsh lights. She stopped at the edge of the hallway, afraid to proceed. The open space felt like standing on a cliff of memories, but she stepped forward, clenching the rail near the wall. Her breath quickened, but she did not retreat. A gust of wind burst through the tunnel ahead. Her hair whipped back as the train roared into view. The sound stabbed through her nerves like a blade. She felt her body recoil instinctively, heart racing wildly. but she held her ground, refusing to let fear erase progress. She watched elderly commuters step calmly onto the train. One older woman even offered her a reassuring nod. Ellen felt a flicker of possibility she hadn't known before. If they could trust the train, maybe she could too. The thought settled softly, like a seed in warm soil. When the doors closed, she stepped closer to the edge, not to board, but to feel the spot she had long avoided. The tracks hummed with fading energy as the train departed. Instead of terror, she felt a strange curiosity awaken. What else had fear kept her from discovering? After several minutes, she stepped back from the platform. Her hands still shook, but her pulse steadied gradually. The station no longer felt like a monster waiting to swallow her. Today, it felt like a challenge she was learning to meet. And walking out, she sensed she was stronger than yesterday. The next morning brought a cautious optimism with it. Ellen moved with practiced breaths as she entered the station. Her feet carried her toward the platform with new confidence. She reached it before fear had time to tighten fully. Today felt different, charged with unfamiliar possibility. A train rumbled into the station, doors sliding open. Ellen stepped forward almost without thinking. The warm air from inside the car brushed her face. Her foot hovered near the threshold, ready to commit. For a second, she imagined herself stepping inside. Then the metallic warning chime pierced her focus. The sharp sound sliced through her courage instantly. Her vision blurred as panic surged violently upward. She stumbled back, clutching her chest for balance. Her breath turned ragged, as though caught in a trap. She retreated quickly to the safety of the far wall. Shame washed over her, bitter and familiar. The train left without her, its lights fading away. She fought tears, feeling the weight of failure again. Her progress suddenly seemed fragile and uncertain. The musician appeared moments later with quiet steps. He sat beside her, offering space instead of words. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked painfully. "I almost did it," she whispered, defeated. "Yes," he said gently, "and that matters more than you know." He shared a brief story about a fear he once carried. Not dramatic, not heroic, just human and heavy. It made Ellen feel less alone, less broken inside. His honesty softened something in her guarded heart. Courage grew quietly, like a breath she hadn't taken yet. When she left the station, her steps were slow but steady. She hadn't boarded the train, yet something meaningful had shifted. The shame didn't cling as tightly as before. Hope threaded through her fear like a fragile lifeline. Tomorrow, she knew she would try again. The following day began in a fog of exhaustion. She had slept poorly, dreams tangled with old memories. Still, she forced herself toward the station once more. But her body felt heavier than usual, worn thin. A quiet dread pressed against her chest from the start. She descended the stairs, but today nothing felt steady. Every sound was too loud, every face too close. The corridor walls seemed to tilt inward menacingly. Her breaths shortened faster than she could control. Fear crept in early, tightening its grip swiftly. By the time she reached the platform, she was unraveling. The roar of an arriving train shook her bones deeply. She stepped back, then back again, heart pounding wildly. The crowd blurred into colors without shape or meaning. Her mind spiraled into the deepest edges of panic. She stumbled toward the wall, clutching it desperately. Her vision narrowed into a dark, trembling tunnel. Tears spilled before she could stop them. Her breath hitched in painful, uneven bursts. Everything inside her screamed to escape immediately. With a broken gasp, she turned and fled the station. Cold air struck her face as she burst onto the sidewalk. But even outside, the panic didn't loosen right away. She collapsed onto a nearby bench, chest heaving violently. The world tilted as she fought to regain control. Her hands shook uncontrollably while she wiped her face. The fear felt heavier than it had in years. Progress seemed like an illusion dissolving instantly. Doubt filled the hollow spaces inside her chest. She wondered if she had been foolish to try at all. As she sat there trembling, a painful truth settled in. Healing wasn't a straight path or a clean victory. She had reached the edge of herself and fallen hard. But somewhere beneath the wreckage, a faint resolve stirred. This collapse wasn't the end, just a moment of breaking open. That evening, Ellen sat in her dimly lit kitchen, staring at the steam rising from a cup of untouched tea. The collapse at the station replayed in her mind with relentless detail, amplifying her doubts and fears. She felt as though every step forward had been swallowed by a single moment of weakness. The silence in the apartment grew heavier until it felt like another weight pressing on her chest. Despair settled close, whispering that maybe she wasn't meant to change after all. Her phone buzzed unexpectedly, breaking the oppressive quiet. It was her daughter, calling from another state with her familiar mixture of warmth and concern. Ellen hesitated before answering, afraid her voice would betray the turmoil inside her. But the moment she heard her daughter's greeting, something inside her softened. It reminded her she wasn't as alone as she often felt. They spoke lightly at first, exchanging ordinary updates and small stories. But Ellen's voice cracked when her daughter asked how she was adjusting to the new job. The truth spilled out in trembling fragments she couldn't hold back anymore. She described the panic, the memories, the humiliation of trying and failing. Her daughter listened closely, giving space for every painful word. When Ellen finally fell silent, her daughter spoke with gentle steadiness. She reminded Ellen of the strength she had shown throughout life, especially during difficult times. She recalled moments Ellen had forgotten, times she had been resilient without even realizing it. "You don't lose because you fall," her daughter said softly. "You win because you keep trying, even when it terrifies you." The words landed deeper than Ellen expected, stirring emotions long buried. She felt the ache of years spent shrinking from the world, all rooted in one old wound. Her daughter's compassion illuminated the quiet truth she had avoided for decades. She had allowed a single moment to define everything that followed. Yet nothing prevented her from choosing differently now. Tears leaked down her cheeks, warm and unrestrained. Not from fear this time, but from the realization that she still had reasons to fight. Her daughter's belief in her felt like a lifeline stretched across the years. Ellen breathed slowly, letting the emotional tide recede without drowning her. A fragile clarity settled in her chest, delicate yet unmistakable. Long after the call ended, she remained seated with her tea, now cooled, beside her. The apartment felt less oppressive, as though something heavy had lifted. She understood that the station wasn't the only place she needed to confront. Her true battle was with the version of herself that had stopped living at 19. And tomorrow, she promised, she would face that version with new courage. Morning arrived gently, with sunlight filtering through the curtains like a quiet invitation. Ellen dressed slowly, aware of a steadier resolve growing in her chest. She felt nervous, but the dread that once dominated her steps had softened. The collapse from yesterday still echoed inside her, yet it no longer defined her. Today felt less like punishment and more like an opportunity to begin again. As she approached the station entrance, the city hummed around her. Instead of rushing past it, she paused and observed the small details often overlooked. The sound of footsteps on pavement, the rumble of distant traffic, the murmur of early commuters. These ordinary textures grounded her presence in the world, not in memory. They reminded her she was standing here now, not reliving a past she couldn't change. Descending the stairs, she noticed how the morning light reflected off the metal railing. The glow created a gentle warmth that softened the harsh lines of the stairwell. She felt a tremor inside her, but it was manageable, almost familiar. Her body braced lightly, yet didn't collapse under the weight of fear. Every step she took felt like a quiet conversation with herself. When she reached the corridor, the musician nodded from his usual place. His presence felt like a reminder that small kindnesses matter deeply. He offered a simple greeting, not prying, just acknowledging her return. Ellen felt gratitude swell inside her, anchoring her feet more firmly. The station no longer seemed like an enemy, but a place with gentle witnesses. She walked slowly, intentionally, letting her senses guide her. She listened to the distant rattle of tracks, letting the sound settle without overpowering her. She traced the tiled patterns with her eyes, noticing their repetition and symmetry. She inhaled the cold metallic scent that once triggered panic, but now felt almost neutral. Every detail she named helped separate the present from the past. Reaching the platform's threshold, she didn't step back as usual. Instead, she allowed herself to stand still, breathing with slow intention. Her heart fluttered unevenly, but it no longer thrashed out of control. She felt the fear, acknowledged it, and let it pass through rather than dominate her. For the first time, she sensed the possibility of coexistence with her memories. After several steady breaths, she turned toward the station exit. There was no urgency, no shame, no desperate retreat. She walked with a calmness she had never felt underground before. Her progress was quiet but unmistakably real. Today, she had met her fear, eye to eye, and remained standing. The next morning, Ellen awoke with a mixture of anticipation and caution. She felt the familiar tension, yet it no longer wrapped around her throat so tightly. Her breaths came easier as she prepared for the day, choosing clothes with steady hands. A fragile yet genuine confidence accompanied her steps out the door. Today held the possibility of a milestone she had avoided for decades. The station greeted her with its usual symphony of echoes and movement. People hurried past, creating a blur of motion she once found overwhelming, but she observed them now with a softer gaze, noticing their ordinariness. Life moved in patterns she was beginning to understand again. She felt herself slowly rejoining a world she had long watched from a distance. When she reached the platform, a train was already approaching. The air shifted as the wind pressed forward from the tunnel. Her heart quickened, but clarity held her steady. She stepped closer, gripping the rail lightly for support. The old fear stirred, but she didn't let it dictate her movement. The train arrived with a roar, brakes screeching against metal. Doors opened with a mechanical sigh that once petrified her. Now, the sound felt more like an invitation than a threat. Her pulse leaped as she lifted her foot toward the threshold. She exhaled, allowing the moment to stretch rather than break. With deliberate care, she stepped onto the train. Her legs trembled, but they held her weight without collapsing. She moved slightly inward, giving space to those behind her. The doors closed gently, sealing her decision with quiet finality. For the first time in 31 years, she remained on board. She gripped the pole as the train lurched forward. The movement startled her, but she didn't retreat into panic. Instead, she allowed the sensation to pass through her body. The world outside blurred into streaks of light and shadow, and within her, something long frozen began to thaw. As the train carried her into the dark tunnel, she held herself upright. She felt small tremors of fear, but also something brighter beneath it. She had crossed the threshold but once felt impossible to approach. Her breath steadied as the city rolled by in rhythmic pulses. For the first time, she sensed the beginning of true freedom. The train continued through the city, its steady rhythm echoing in her bones. Every movement reminded her of the moment she had spent years avoiding. But now, the sway of the car felt less like a threat and more like a fragile partnership. She allowed herself to absorb the experience as it unfolded naturally. Fear lingered, but it no longer overshadowed every breath she took. She watched reflections flicker across the train windows. Commuters stood around her, each absorbed in their own silent stories. For the first time, she realized she wasn't the only one carrying invisible wounds. There was comfort in that thought, a quiet sense of belonging she hadn't expected. It softened the edges of her anxiety, grounding her in shared humanity. As the train left one station and sailed into another, she noticed subtle details: the faint vibration underfoot, the hum of the rails, the rustle of newspapers. None of these sensations felt hostile the way they once had. They were simply parts of a world she had shut out for too long. Now, she welcomed them cautiously, letting each detail settle gently. Her mind wandered through memories she had kept locked away. She revisited the moment of near tragedy, but it looked different now. It felt like a chapter in a long book rather than a sentence that defined her. She finally understood that trauma had shaped her life, not stolen it, and she still had the power to write the remaining pages differently. A warmth spread through her chest as the train approached the next stop. It wasn't joy exactly, but something quieter and more profound. A slow recognition that healing didn't erase fear, it transformed it. She felt the weight of years shifting ever so slightly. Space opened inside her where panic once lived. When the train slowed, she held the pole with steady hands. The doors opened, letting in a rush of new city air. She stepped off carefully, but without hesitation. The platform beneath her feet felt solid and welcoming. She realized she had crossed an unseen boundary within herself. Walking toward the exit, she moved with a calm she had never felt underground. The station no longer loomed as a symbol of past terror. Instead, it felt like a bridge she had finally learned to cross. Her breaths came evenly, carrying newfound strength. This ride had not erased her fear, it had rewritten her relationship to it. In the days that followed, the subway became part of her routine. Not effortless, not perfect, but manageable in ways she once believed impossible. Each trip reinforced the truth that fear could coexist with courage. She learned to navigate the station with a steady rhythm of breath and awareness. Her mornings no longer began with dread but with quiet expectation. Coworkers noticed the change before she mentioned it. Her arrivals were punctual, her posture more assured, her voice clearer. She laughed more easily, surprising even herself with the sound. The tension that had clung to her shoulders for decades loosened visibly. She felt the subtle relief of reclaiming pieces of herself long forgotten. One afternoon, she paused on the platform after work. The musician played a gentle melody that drifted across the tiles. She approached and thanked him for his presence during her darkest moments. He simply smiled and nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Some acts of kindness bloom quietly, leaving roots where they matter most. As she rode home, she gazed out at the passing darkness. The tunnel lights flickered like distant stars guiding her forward. She thought about the decades lost to avoidance, grief, and isolation. Yet she felt no bitterness, only gratitude for the moment she was living now, reclaiming her life, even at 50, felt like a blessing she hadn't anticipated. She realized that every step down the station stairs had mirrored her internal journey, descending into fear, confronting old shadows, and emerging with new strength. Her transformation wasn't sudden, but woven through countless fragile choices. She had rebuilt herself from wounds she once believed unhealable, and in doing so, she discovered a resilience she never knew she carried. Walking out of the station that evening, she lifted her face to the twilight sky. The air held a gentle chill, carrying hints of the city's endless stories. She felt a quiet pride, knowing she had rewritten her own beginning. Her life no longer revolved around the moment she almost fell. Instead, it centered on the countless moments she chose to rise. Ellen headed home with steady steps, embracing the world as it unfolded before her. She no longer feared the trains beneath the city or the shadows within her past. Each day held new territory to explore, inside and out. With unwavering hope, she had learned that it is never too late to reclaim the life you once abandoned. And as she walked, she felt the unmistakable warmth of a reborn soul.